Hey everybody, welcome to this short micro podcast. I'm here with Matt and Remus. Remus is with Concept Reply, System Integrator, and Matt is here. You're the field director or?
Solutions advisor.
So he's a solutions advisor with HiveMQ. He gave a speech on AI. The goal of this podcast is to surface insights from this event that we're at. We're here at MX.0 Southeast in Greenville, South Carolina. It's on day 2. So Matt, just real quick, why don't you give us a quick summary of what your AI speech was about, and we can kind of dive into it, and we'll try to keep this short and easy to consume for the audience.
Thanks, Zach. So I talked about yesterday about why AI fails in the factory. It really comes down to 3 core things. The data is not structured, the data is fragmented, and there is no governance around it. Are really the key 3 concepts that we want to take to manufacturers, right? What they do is you have all these isolated lines, isolated platforms. They're all talking independently. Different groups of data are using the data for different things across different groups. And I know Remus sees a lot of that in the customers he talks to.
Yeah, it's spot on. I think if you're looking to do these types of AI type of projects, right? There's so much variation in what we think AI is and can do, especially when it starts coming into the 4 walls of a factory. And so when we start looking at governance, structure, foundation, all that type of stuff starts to become really important. You know, I gave the analogy, I don't remember who we were talking to the other day, but it's like if you were building a house, what would you build first? The roof? No, you'd build the foundation first, and I think it's the same that we're seeing in the industry. And I think we're getting a lot of customers coming to us right now that are asking for, we want to go down this path of AI and leveraging some of this, really great technology, but what do we have to do first? What are the foundational pieces that we have to put in place? So obviously that's why we've aligned so closely with what HiveMQ is doing and have partnered very strongly to help customers build that foundation, build that context, build that engine that's going to drive the ability to leverage a lot of that technology as we move forward.
Yeah, and HiveMQ brings that underlying data backbone. So not only do we help make that data available, right, we help standardize that data, make it hierarchical in nature, and allow that data to flow securely from OT to IT, and then on up to cloud databases or upstream systems like ERP, MES, SCADA, and historians.
Yeah, the foundational piece, right? If you want to start talking about UNS and all the buzz around kind of that piece of it, it fits perfectly in line with what we want to get out of AI. AI to be successful, you have to have a strong data foundation. You have to have a strong data, contextualization layer. You have to have access to that data. So I think it makes perfect sense. And yeah, your talk yesterday was great.
Yep, and it kind of comes down to, in the end, if I would sum it up in a very, very short statement, no data equals no AI. So without the data and without the data properly governed and structured, you have no AI platform to make decisions on in real time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Excel is not that platform. I was talking with someone who was in supply chain, and it's really cool to see the diffusion of different departments here. There's a lot of manufacturing end users, and so I was asking, what is your biggest problem? No surprise, it was getting access to the data that she needs to do her job. Yeah. When she was doing supply chain, she was having to go through monthly spreadsheets and get the value, and so she was doing all these macros and what she said was, and this is important, I feel, is depending on how she asked the question, she got a different result. So depending on who she was talking to, that data actually existed in a database somewhere, and she was like, I've been asking for this. Yeah. So I kind of floated the idea of unified namespace, right? You threw out UNS. For those of you that are not aware of unified namespace, how would you describe it? And honestly, there's no better people to describe it because HiveMQ was really one of the major proponents of evangelizing unified namespace into where it's kind of taken over, but there are still people who don't know it. So what is a unified namespace in your words?
So first off, for unified namespace, from what I see with customers, is it's the hierarchical design of your data, right? How do I want my data to look as it comes through my data platforms, whatever data platform that is? And so there's been a standard that's kind of developed. It's a little bit of an offshoot from ISA 95 of you start out with your global corporation / plant / site / cell / work zone, all the way down the line for being able to get that data. And when you apply those rules to it, across all your plants, you get a very easy hierarchical design of your data that you can make really quick decisions on. HiveMQ specifically offers the ability to secure that. You want to do things like you don't want plant 1 to be able to talk to plant 2. That becomes available with a platform like HiveMQ. But it comes back to design a really good UNS. It really actually starts with a thought exercise and an architectural decision of this is what we want to look. And most of the time you'll have at least 5 or 10 revisions before you ever get it to actually implementation, and then you might end up making a couple revisions in the first year and a couple more in previous years. If you don't mind real quick though, I want to go back to your Excel statement, and I'm not here in this podcast to really push product, but I do want to bring up one interesting thing you mentioned about Excel. And one of the unique features that HiveMQ, we also offer a Edge solution. HiveMQ Edge actually has the ability to import Excel files as CSVs and translate those into MQTT messages. And so that's one of the things we heard is Excel is a big problem as well. Like the data is stuck in Excel. And HiveMQ Edge, which is open source that you can go grab and play with today, that's why I have no problem mentioning it here. You can use our CSV adapter, grab that CSV file and get it into MQTT today.
Yeah, we actually did that with a customer. So we had a customer that had lab equipment, test equipment that was generating a ton of CSV data. It wasn't even in Excel, it was just CSV data. We were able to actually take HiveMQ Edge, parse that file over MQTT and ingest it as if it was just a normal PLC on the shop floor. So I'll go to the UNS definition question. So for me, since Matt went in that technical area, I'll kind of go a little bit more functional. And I'll say for us, we work with a lot of enterprise customers that have a lot of enterprise data problems, and most of them are familiar in the world of data lake, data warehouse. So if we think about that context, I like to look at the UNS as the data river that feeds that data lake, data warehouse type idea. It's essentially a data plane. It's an access layer that allows all applications, all use cases inside your organization to reach into one area to pull whatever sort of information you're looking for. So if it's PLC data plus operator data plus test data plus ERP plus MES, whatever, instead of building point-to-point solutions, we've kind of created this data mesh, if you will, around accessing that information. So now I have any application I want to build on top of it, I have one point to go look to pull all relevant information and build whatever use case I want on top of it.
I like that. I'm going to pivot here because this is a good, I think, starting point for context around Unified Namespace. I like how you use that analogy that it's the river that feeds the data lake. One thing I said yesterday that clicked with somebody was you're creating a single pane of glass to have a single entry point to access all of that data. Each project, starts with having a digital strategy, right? It starts with digital transformation, and it's not a buzzword. It is really about the process of turning data into a primary commodity used to drive decision making. So, and that starts with collecting that data, normalizing it, putting it in a unified namespace so everyone in the organization can access it. Because most of the people, they're spending most of their time just getting access to the data they need to do their jobs, right? That's half of your integration costs. So if you flip it and, each project is one part of a bigger whole. You're building infrastructure, you're not building a wall on top of a couch. Where do you see Unified Namespace being used where it shouldn't?
Well, that's a good question. I think the fundamental thing that you kind of touched on a little bit there is people start with this notion that they want to do a UNS, which is a great notion to start with, but they never define an end goal of what the UNS is built to. Go ahead.
Or they are building a UNS without realizing that's what it's called. But
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So one of the, I love what Matt said about the thought exercises around what you should do to start with, and our end mission, and I've done this with customers when they come to us to say, we want to do a UNS, and I say, great, why? What problem are we trying to solve, right? Like a UNS is not, it's a mechanism to get to solving problems, right? So if we start with a definition of something that we are trying to accomplish, right? What is our problem statement? How are we going to get to that resolution point? What does success even look like, right? Is success building UNS? I don't think so. I think success is actually solving the problem we use the UNS to solve. And so one of the things that we look at significantly in this space is like our entire existence as an integrator is to help manufacturers solve problems. If I'm out there not solving problems, then I'm not doing my job and I'm not helping my customers win and doing this digital transformation stuff.
And just to piggyback on what Remus was saying there, that's absolutely great, because as much as I want to sell you a product as a software company that HiveMQ is, right? If I'm not helping you solve a business problem, whatever product I sell you is going to be meaningless in the end, because you're not getting the true value of that product. And so definitely, from our side, we start with a business problem too. What are you actually trying to solve, and how can we help you get there? And if it isn't a full end-to-end solution, we pull in Remus to help customers with that.
Yeah, especially even if you look at like AI, right? So this is kind of gendered around AI. What do we look at in terms of full aspect of a project in how we apply AI, right? There's AI use cases that we look at to solve manufacturing challenges, but then there's also the AI use cases of setting up the foundational things that are going to help us solve those problems, right? So AI isn't just the end goal, it's also the mechanism that allows us to do things a lot faster now, right? Like you can't move 5 feet without hearing about Claude Code or Codex, or you pick your flavor cursor, whichever one. So us as an organization are really looking at how do we take AI not only as the end goal of building these foundations, but how do we use it to accelerate the ability for us to build the unified namespace, leverage HiveMQ data, all those types of things that are going to help us drive value, to your point, to manufacturers faster.
Yeah, and part of that comes down to, right, being able, once you deploy a solution, you can get into things like the governance. To wrap this kind of section up, is the governance and the ability to do data validation and transformation on the fly and at scale, which is some of the things that you can do to make sure that data quality is good as you send it up to AI. Because if you put it into bad data into your data lake, it becomes a data swamp.
Yeah, I think one of the most important skill sets of not only engineers and architects, but also managers of the future, is going to be AI governance. It's going to be a skill set that you have to know, because your teams, your plants, your factories, your groups, everybody is going to be trying to experiment with AI more and more. And it is critically important that there is governance around that, security, all those things that could potentially be a big problem area.
And that governance starts today, not once you have AI going and you've already turned it on. The governance starts today in planning and getting ready for it.
Absolutely.
So we'll try to drive it home on a tangible point here, right? So I was on the call, or I was on a podcast earlier with the supply chain expert, and she said, she was telling me about how she was analyzing data in spreadsheets. Like, she knew she needed the data to solve her problems. She grasped the concept of unified namespace. Let's say, 100% I'm in, right? I know I'm not just going to need this one spreadsheet to solve this one problem. I know I'm going to really need this data, and it's like a single source of truth, or like it's the master data, or if you will. This data is going to be used to solve many problems. The Amazon example comes to mind, right? Amazon knows what you want to buy 6 weeks before you buy it, and they do that by collecting all data. They don't know necessarily you are going to buy it, but they know someone in your area, and that's how they get it to you in 48 hours or less. That couldn't be possible without using the machine learning and training models. So that's where obviously she wants to get her company to. Let's say she's on board. Not how do I get started, but how do I overcome resistance internally to this type of approach? How would I overcome that? And I feel like, Remus, you might have really good insights here, but I'll also be curious to hear your take too, as Matt.
I'll jump in and start first. And so this is actually one of the questions that was asked live after my talk yesterday. And so from a HiveMQ perspective, we're a product company, and so we sell a product. But what we see for these particular problems is that a lot of times they run into barriers because it's a education issue. And that education issue is because they're holding on to silos. Like, they feel that if other teams are like, I have this power because I have this thing that I do that nobody else does, and it's job security, job protection, right? And sometimes you have to leverage a third party, whether it's HiveMQ coming in, Concept Reply coming in, and just doing some education and show how it can benefit everybody. Sometimes it takes a third party to come in and change that conversation, because that particular person, I don't know, can change the conversation by themselves. There needs somebody else to help with that conversation, to help show the better value and also move up the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I say it all the time. The holy trinity of people, process, technology is as true today as it's ever been, right? Technology is only one piece of how we get to end solutions, right? There is the people piece, there is the process piece. I think one of the things people forget about the most is the people piece, right? Like, not only do you have to overcome technical challenges and process challenges, but there are people challenges. There's political capital that you'll run into. And I think, Matt, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the best way through ignorance, or if you want to call it that, is knowledge, right? So educating end customers, educating users, educating even your own internal team on why these tools are making an impact, why they're important, how we can drive value from them is as important as it's ever been, right? Education is perfect way to close it out. Learn more about the subject matter. I mean, there's so much happening with AI. There are so many things going on. There's so many videos and podcasts and all these different things. If you are not spending your time educating yourself on this wave of what's happening with AI, then you are already far behind a lot of companies that are.
Yep, and one last thing is, you're not alone on this journey. Every manufacturer is going through this. And so leveraging experts in the field, like Remus, like HiveMQ experts, right, and other industry leaders to help drive those points home for you, I think will help get over those barriers quicker than you trying to learn yourself and trying to empower your internal teams. A lot of times bringing in the experts take down that barrier very quickly.
Yeah.
You guys heard it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Listen, digital transformation is real, and you have the power to change your factory, to change your future. You have the ability to bring this to your plant and be the hero. And you're in the right spot. It starts with education. That's why you're here. If you can't get approval to bring in an outside consultant because you can't get a budget approval, maybe you don't bring them in for a week. Maybe you do it for a day. Yeah. If you can't afford a day of consulting, maybe do an hour. If you can't do an hour, maybe you show up at the bar after MX.0 and you just you start bugging Remus and asking him a few questions. Or start with where you can and start with what you have influence over. So maybe that's your little department, or maybe that's your little machine, or maybe you're the CIO and you have full control over the full IT infrastructure. Start with what you have control over, and then expand. Use the gains that you've captured through digital transformation to fund the initiative, and you will be the hero of your plant. You'll probably make a lot of money too. So,
yep.
Were you going to say something?
Nope. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time. Bye.
Bye.
Sweet.
Cool. Jordan's week.
That actually turned out way better than I thought.
Sometimes
Thanks,
you just gotta vibe it,